I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. All right, we don't have any public hearings, so we will jump right into proclamations.
Okay, could I please have Beth Hubbard, Patty Bernardo, and Kathleen Cuddy? Breastfeeding Week in Cayuga County. Whereas in our society, it is important civic responsibility and great honor for any governmental body to grant public recognition, admiration, and gratitude to those various citizens who have helped to build this community and influence the future of our citizens. And whereas breastfeeding is one of the best gifts you can give your baby, it helps strengthen the bond between mother and baby, protect infants from a variety of health issues, including cold, ear infections, and even helps protect against childhood disease. Whereas Cayuga County and the Cayuga County Health Department, including the Women, Infants, and Children Food Supplement Nutrition Program, and our community partners, promotes and supports breastfeeding as the best source of infant nutrition. Whereas Cayuga County celebrates the Cayuga County Health Department, including WIC Supplemental Nutrition Program for assisting with breastfeeding by readily providing one internationally board certified lactation consultant, 4 certified lactation counselors, and 2 WIC peer counselors, together with staff who actively promote breastfeeding and offer support to women enrolled in the maternal child health programs, including the Nurse Family Partnership and WIC Supplement Food Program. Thank you. Cayuga County and the Cayuga County Health Department, together with our WIC Supplemental Nutrition Program, join professional health organizations and breastfeeding advocates worldwide in celebrating World Breastfeeding Week, August 1st through the 7th of each year, to collaboratively raise awareness of the numerous benefits of breastfeeding, to strengthen individual, family, and community support for breastfeeding, to further strategize that promote breastfeeding practices, and to support increased breastfeeding rates. And whereas in recognition of World Breastfeeding Week, the Cayuga County Health Department with Supplemental Nutrition Programs participated in the Global Breastfeeding held August 4th, 2008 at Hoops Park for its 4th consecutive year to encourage, celebrate, and raise awareness of breastfeeding in the community. And whereas the Cayuga County Health Department and WIC Supplemental Nutrition Program provide breastfeeding education and support to all interested people in our community in conjunction with our partners, including offering check costs to new mothers giving birth at Auburn Community Hospital. Now therefore be it resolved in appreciation of breastfeeding mothers and dedicated people in the community to support their efforts. I, Dr. Cahoon, Chairman of the Cayuga Legislature and fellow legislators, we hereby proclaim our gratitude and urge the residents of our county to join with us in recognizing World Breastfeeding Week, August 1st to the 7th, 2018.
So thank you, Chairman Hoonick and Justin and Kathleen and everybody for honoring us with this really tremendous recognition. The WIC program has been in Cayuga County for over 40 years, and the work that we do every day, it's nice to have a little bit of recognition. I want to especially say to Patty Granado, who has been with us about 22 years, we are privileged enough to have an IBCLC certified lactation consultant on staff with the WIC program, one of only maybe 3 or 4 in this entire area. So we really do honor and support and encourage and are there for our breastfeeding moms and whatever their to support whatever their goals are. So I really do want to say thank you, and this was unexpected, but really appreciated. So thank you very much. Patty, do you want to say anything?
I just wanted to thank everyone for honoring us, and I just want to let you know that it does take a community to help families And with breastfeeding, it really does make a difference, and so we need everyone's help, and we really appreciate the county and the city coming together on that special day at Hoops Park. And it's just been going so well, and so I just want to thank everyone who has helped, like I said, through the county and through the city. So thank you all.
Tim Lattimore?
Here you go. Oh, you got it, Kyle?
St. Mary's Church Day, August 15, 2018. Whereas St. Mary's will celebrate the 150th year of founding of its parish on August 15, 2018. And whereas the Reverend Bishop Bernard J. McQuaid, who was the first bishop of the Diocese of Rochester, as one of his official acts on August 15, 1868, established St. Mary's as the Assumption Parish in Auburn, New York, in honor of the feast of the day. And whereas Reverend Thomas J. Mahard, the first pastor of St. Mary's Parish, purchased the property at the corner of Clark and Green Streets, where he erected a temporary wooden structure as the first church building, and thereafter the second pastor, Reverend Miles Laughlin, purchased additional adjacent property in order to construct a stone church structure beginning in 1870, and he also purchased additional property at 11-13 Clark Street for the building of a school. And whereas the church was dedicated by Bishop McQuaid on April 29, 1877, as an excellent example of modified Gothic architecture, and it was noted that the cost of the building was in the amount of $79,350. Whereas each succeeding pastor accomplished significant improvements for the church and school. Appointed September 9, 1887, the third pastor, Reverend William Mulheron, provided new furnishing for the church and school. Reverend William Payne, the fourth pastor in 1913, began the movement to install bells in the church tower. Reverend John McGrath finalized the task by having the bells installed in Rome for the first time on October 3, 1926. Reverend William E. Cowan, sixth pastor of Auburn, native, was baptized in St. Mary's Church at 10 years of age and was a graduate of St. Mary's School in his class of 1892. He added the Green Street entrance to the church. He was appointed as Monsieur Confiance at 12 and was an active leader in the civic life of Auburn. Right Reverend Monsieur James D. Cuffley, the seventh pastor, established a new school at 17 Pine Street in 1960. Oversaw the renovation of the church in 1965 after his retirement, remained in Auburn and served beneath the parish until his passing in 1988. Reverend Edward Zimmer, the eighth pastor, witnessed the decline of the number of priests in the diocese, then establishing a pastoral staff of lay people and spent many long hours reconciling the miracle spirit of God in the community and especially during ministering to the children of the parish. Whereas the ninth pastor, Reverend Robert Schrader, began his service as pastor in 1992, and thereafter began substantial renovation and restoration of the church and basements, then named Seam Hall, which was completed in April 1997. The parish council honored Father Schrader by renaming Seam Hall Father Schrader Hall for his accomplishments. Whereas the 10th and current pastor, Reverend Frank D. Loy, came to the parish in 2004 with wealth of physical and pastoral experience. He served in the faculty and administration of St. Bernard Seminary as the vice rector of the American College of Louvain in Belgium. One of his first acts was to preside over the celebration of the alumni reunion, 1921 to 1960, of the Clark Street Grade School. Father Leoy established a welcome venue at the Church of Concerts and Culture events with performances by renowned musical and choir groups. He also was instrumental in the restoration of the 1892 Breakfast pipe organ, which is utilized extensively for church functions to the present day. Now therefore be it that I, second Honig, chair of the P10 legislator and fellow legislators, do hereby congratulate St. Mary's Church in the event of the 150th anniversary by proclaiming August 15, 2018 as St. Mary's Church Day in Cayuga County. we urge the residents of our county to share within all related celebratory festivities.
Well, Honorable Chairperson Patrick Mahunik and Vice Chairperson Timothy Latimer and the members of the Cayuga County Legislature, really on behalf of all of the 9 pastors who have preceded me since 1868, it's really on their behalf and on the behalf of the thousands of parishioners who have gone before all of us since 1868. It is with that that I gratefully receive this proclamation. All of us present from St. Mary's Church really stand on the shoulders of those immigrants who built our magnificent church building and the faithful parishioners who supported it for all of these years. You know, in his book, Father Andrew Greeley wrote The Catholic Imagination, and he wrote that Catholics kind of live in an enchanted world, a world of statues and holy water, stained glass and votive candles, saints and religious medals, rosary beads and holy pictures, and we could also add art and architecture, poetry and music, sacraments and sacramentals. And Greeley goes on to say that these are all mere hints of a deeper and more pervasive religious sensibility that inclines Catholics to see the holy lurking in creation. And so I like to think that the presence of our Gothic splendor of St. Mary's Church standing in downtown Auburn is a sign for all to see the holy lurking in this city. And I like to believe that this building is a reminder of God's presence in our world. And I like to hope that those who hear the bells of St. Mary's each day are hearing a call to be the best person that God has created them to be. And so, members of the Cayuga County Legislature, I thank you for this proclamation. It will be associated with all of our activities that surrounded our 150th anniversary year, and we ask that God continue to bless your work and all that you do for Cayuga County. Thank you.
Right next to you.
Water Quality Month, August 2018. Cayuga County is blessed with abundant lakes and streams, including Blue Finger Lakes, a Great Lake, and the Seneca River, a rural, renowned fish water ecosystem of great beauty and significance. Whereas Cayuga County citizens rely on clean surface waters as a source of drinking water and for recreation, including swimming, fishing, boating, and more. And whereas clean water is critical for the health of wildlife and ecological systems of Cayuga County. And whereas numerous threats to water quality exist as nutrients, erosion, invasive species, harmful algal blooms, and whereas our local and state agencies as well as citizens groups work hard to protect and enhance our water resources. And whereas the Cayuga County Planning and Health Departments have taken the lead on a number of water quality initiatives, working with local and regional partners, including but not limited to the City of Auburn, the Town of Owasco, the Cayuga County Water Quality Management Agency, Cornell Cooperative Extension of Cayuga County, Cayuga County Soil and Water Conservation District, Owasco Lake Watershed Management Council, the United States DEC, Finger Lakes Water Hub, the Owasco Watershed Lake Association, and other local volunteer groups on important water quality projects such as the update of the Owasco Lake Watershed Rules and Regulations, development of an Owasco Lake Watershed 9 element plan, development of manure management and roadside ditch maintenance guidelines, expansion of citizen sampling programs, protecting the public from harmful algae blooms, invasive species education and control, septic system inspections, household hazardous waste, electronic collection events, and deployment of best management practices throughout the county. And whereas each citizen of our county is called upon to help protect our waters from pollution, to practice water conservation, and to get involved in local water issues by getting to know their water. And whereas the Cayuga County desires to promote water quality, and therefore declares August should be designated as Water Quality Month. Now therefore be it that I, Patrick Mahoney, Chairman of the Cayuga County Legislature, along with fellow legislators, do hereby proclaim and urge the residents of our county to join with us in recognizing August 2018 as Water Quality Month in Cayuga County.
Now they're making a presentation. The only thing I'd like to say is on a day when we get this kind of resolution and proclamation, we both wish we had more than 2 resolutions for water quality on the agenda for you to vote on tonight. Thank you.
Kathleen Cuddy.
Keith Cutler, would you like to come up? I'm pleased to get to read the proclamation for National Health Center Week. Whereas National Health Center Week 2018 provides an opportunity to visit a community health center and see firsthand why they are now at the center stage in a changing healthcare landscape. This past year, Congress, with strong bipartisan support, invested in health centers, recognizing that a strong community-based system of care where people have easy access to doctors and preventive care will save lives and reduce healthcare costs. And whereas health centers like ours in Cayuga County are part of a nationwide network that is the family doctor to more than 27 million Americans, our mission to provide affordable options for primary care is well established. What may be lesser known is that we are proven innovators and problem solvers in treating chronic disease. We look beyond medical charts not only to prevent illness, but also address the factors that actually cause poor health, such as poverty, homelessness, substance use, mental illness, lack of nutrition, and unemployment. And whereas health centers are on the front lines dealing with complex problems no one wants to think about, including the devastating opioid crisis and the growing problem of obesity in economically challenged neighborhoods, health conditions that, if left unchecked, end up in hospital emergency rooms for costly treatment. We save the U.S. healthcare system $24 billion a year by managing health conditions and reducing unnecessary visits to the hospital. And whereas our model of care works by treating the whole patient with an integrated range of services located under one roof. That way our patients, including low-income families, veterans, and the elderly, need not navigate a confusing maze of services to see a dentist or fill a prescription. Yet, all too often, this happens in our fragmented system of care, even for patients who have both insurance and a regular provider. At health centers, the goal is to provide everyone with easy access to care no matter who they are, where they are from, or if they have an insurance card. And whereas the theme of this year's National Health Center Week is Celebrating Health Centers, Home of America's Healthcare Heroes, but none of us who work in health centers considers ourselves heroes. Rather, we are people in the community who believe that affordable health care should always be within reach for everyone who needs it. During National Health Care Week, Center Week, we invite you to learn more about health centers by visiting one near you and learning about the range of services and programs we offer, talk with our clinicians and staff, and find out why health centers are a good prescription for our nation's health. Now therefore be it resolved, Patrick Mahunik, Chair of the Cayuga County Legislature, do hereby proclaim our gratitude and urge residents of our county to join with us in recognizing National Health Center Week, August 12th through 18th, 2018 in Cayuga County. And here to receive this is Keith Cutler, who's our CEO of East Hill Family Medical Center.
Thank you, everyone. Here with me tonight is Sue Messenger. She's the vice chairperson of our board of directors, and we just finished our August board meeting and kind of scooted over here. I want to take the opportunity to thank all of you for pausing to recognize the work of East Hill Family Medical and all community health centers across the country on behalf of not only the board of directors and our employees, but our tens of thousands of patients that we see every day. East Hill is your community health center right here in Cayuga County, providing adult medicine services, pediatric services, family planning and reproductive health, as well as dental services, both in the clinic within the building 2 doors down and throughout numerous schools within the county, providing services to kids who otherwise wouldn't see a dentist. So thank you very much for the opportunity. As you heard from the proclamation that Kathleen read, community health centers actually see 1 out of every 9 people in the United States. It's a critical resource that we must keep in play, and I can't tell you how close this country came to losing its community health centers last fall when the federal funding, 70% of the federal funding that all community health centers receive expired and was not renewed until earlier this year. And it again expires in December of 2019. So we want to keep up the focus and the effort and the pressure to make sure that the community health center funding nationwide continues for many years to come. Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, Ms. Messenger happens to be married to one of the great Albernians' grandson, William H. Seward. I know we had a chance to go to the White House the other day, and when we were doing the tour, the one thing I forgot to mention to you is that the ivy that's on the White House actually came from the Seward Garden here in Auburn. So it's another little fact that I forgot to tell you.
Thank you. That was a very
Thank you,
enlightening
Sue.
trip. All right. Before we move on, I just want to say thank you to all the recipients of the proclamations. It really shows what a community we have here in Cayuga County. So thank you for all your hard work and everything that you're doing to make this the best place to live. All right. So we have a presentation from Abundant Solar.
Hello. Thanks so much for making time for me this evening. I've been told to be expedient, so I'm going to go a little quickly at the beginning, and then I'll slow down, and if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. My name's Melissa Clark, and I'm the Vice President of Business Development for Abundant Solar Power. I'm here this evening with a partner in this project, along with 33 others, Chris Carrick from the Central New York Planning and Development Board, based in Syracuse. So Abundant, you've been briefed on who we are before. We're actually a full-service developer based in Rochester and with a parent company based in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. We do everything from site origination through full-service engineering to managing the construction process and then operations and management of the arrays over the life of its productivity. So the project that we're looking at here in Cayuga is relatively new to New York State, and it leverages something called community solar. And community solar has been growing rapidly in other states. Principally, it started in Colorado. It's also being leveraged in California and Massachusetts, amongst other states. But in 2015, the concept of community solar was brought to New York State. It took a while to work itself through process, and we have only in 2018 seen our first community solar arrays constructed in the state. What's different about community solar is that it's really designed to cater to folks who would really like to purchase green power, but they, for one reason or another, can't build an array on their own property. They could be living in an apartment building, they could be living in an old farmhouse that either doesn't have the right exposure to the sun or doesn't have the right structural support for an array on the rooftop. But for whatever reason, we know there to be a fairly large pent-up demand for green power, and in this case, green power at a discount off of what is currently being paid to the utility. So the concept of community solar is that we identify property, in this case being provided by the county, that the county can benefit as a subscriber to that community solar array. But the real benefit is spread across all the constituents within the county who choose to purchase that green energy at a discount. So just a little briefing on the Public Service Commission and NYSERDA working together to create a fairly robust community distributed generation policy in New York. Really focused on the goal of 50% renewables by 2030, a focus on reducing energy costs to customers, anyone who chooses to subscribe, as well as giving folks the opportunity to choose green energy over a carbon footprint energy source. So, as I mentioned, Chris has been working on this project and on moving the REV program, or the vision for renewable and the greenification of New York's energy supply, forward for over 3 years now. And currently, we are working with the Planning Board on 33 sites across 24 different participating organizations, and they range from villages with a small water treatment plant footprints where they have tanks on a site, but they have a small space that is available to put panels on to add to their green strategy, to landfills that otherwise have no use and are fallow, where we can produce green energy, to county-led initiatives like the one in Cayuga, where we're looking to use a portion of a property that's currently fallow. We also have the City of Auburn looking to use their landfill. So we've got a fairly broad scope of participating organizations, but all looking to participate in putting a foot forward in bringing green energy to New York, and in being active participants, sometimes to benefit the town, village, city, or county exclusively, and in other cases to share community solar across the broader group of constituents. So we'd like to leave today having assured you that what we're proposing is safe, is efficient, is cost-effective, clean and sustainable and resilient, and more significantly, local. So the array is proposed at the Cayuga County House Road complex. And the property is actually the entire space, and the space that we're proposing to use is a small subsection of the entire space. So 86 acres in total, and 28 acres of that would be used for the array itself. Now that looks pretty dense in the site plan, but I can assure you there's more green space than there is tables or panels. There's approximately 16 feet left fallow between the array panels because we have shading constraints. And so that means we'll have growth underneath the panels, which we will maintain, and we have these large swaths of usually a low-speed clover mix planting underneath the arrays. So the array will produce 6.5, 6.6, depending on how you round, megawatts DC. I know there's a reference on another page about 5 megawatts. That would be AC. Typically, people outside the utility speak in DC power. People within the utility umbrella will speak in terms of AC. They're actually the same number. We're speaking to the same scale of array. And this will provide electricity for about 1,000 homes. So depending on what the average use is in this particular area, we'll be helping 1,000 families or 1,000 small businesses become green energy users. So the array is fairly simple, and we like to call it passive technology. It's stationary, it's structurally sound, it sits about 3 feet at the bottom end of the array, about 9 feet at the top end, and it sits at approximately 26 degrees in a south-facing configuration. So it's not hugely technical. They're very reliable, proven technology. And the arrays themselves, the panels are actually warranted for 25 years. So when we talk about a power purchase agreement, it actually lines up with the duration for which the technology is warranted. So this is a profile shot of an array, and you can see some of that scale of green space in between the array when you actually get towards the front of it. It will be surrounded by fence for security of both the array and the material within the array and for people. Of course, the county is actively using the property and would continue to have access to the space in between the two segments of array. So, benefits. The county in this circumstance is actually going to be using a fairly small portion of the power from the entire array. But it also leaves the opportunity, should the county acquire different buildings or put more streetlights up or what have you, that they could actually expand their subscription to power from the array. So because the array is going to actually generate about 6.5 megawatts, the county takes only 2% of that production. Now we have other arrays where towns or villages are building smaller arrays but actually using 100% of the power. And in those circumstances, we call it remote net metering. It's one agency that's using all the power that's being produced at a site. In this circumstance, the value is really in the sharing of the cost savings for power over 25 years in a very small portion to the county. But the real benefit is the community aspect of this. So the county's residences who choose to subscribe and receive about 10% cost savings on their power over 25 years will save $2.6 million in energy costs, and they'll be purchasing green energy. So in addition to that, there are some less visible benefits. Anytime we put up an array like this as a developer, we have to interact with the utility, and in this case it's NYSEG. We apply for interconnection. They come back to us and tell us how much money it's going to cost to interconnect. And those monies are used to improve the grid infrastructure. They're used to upgrade substations. They're used to help make feeder lines more robust. Basically, those monies are used to do the things that the utility wouldn't naturally be volunteering to upgrade. So there are some benefits that are very tangible and real dollars are exchanged, but they're not necessarily visible to folks who aren't actively engaged in the negotiation. The other benefit is that solar actually aligns with use for peak power, demand for peak power in quite a precise manner. So you all know that most of your baseload power comes from nuclear facilities, and most of your peak load power has to come from facilities where you can turn the power on and turn it off, and the demand is very quick and immediate. So those are typically supported by gas-fired plants or coal plants. In the case of solar generates most efficiently and in its highest volume in the middle of a very hot sunny day in the summer when everybody is going to turn on their air conditioners. So having a solar array in the community means that it removes the need for replacement peak power plants. And peak power plants cost a lot to build, and somebody ends up paying for them, typically the user of the power that comes from the peak power plant. So the benefit of having solar locally is that it removes that need to upgrade or replace peak power plants because the solar array is effectively your local peak power plant. So I know there's been some discussion, and I saw an article in the press recently about concerns around revenue and operating costs. So I'd just like to speak to that for a moment. So the whole concept of community solar or CDG is supported by a compensation methodology that's been introduced through this program called VEDR. And VEDR is the value of distributed energy resources. And it is a relatively complicated stack of items that the PSC has gotten together with the utilities and decided that by generating power locally, you are actually offsetting certain costs in the energy stream. So you're reducing costs, for transmission. You're reducing carbon detriment costs. You're putting your power close to where the use is, amongst other things. So VEDR is a set value, and once we connect to the grid, that VEDR compensation methodology is locked in for 25 years. That's not to say that VEDR doesn't fluctuate. It does. There are complex calculations about sun irradiance and number of sun days and whatnot that impact it over the span of time, but the concept of the payment is locked for 25 years. So it's not something that's going to go away tomorrow. This is like a contract with the government. The other issue is operating costs. So solar is a fairly reliable and, as I mentioned, passive science. So we have 35, 40 years of record, both in Europe and in the California market, of how solar arrays like the one we're proposing here behave. This is not complex. This is not a rotating array. This is not a reflective array. This is a very, let's call it solid state array. So we get very predictable models for these arrays, and that's how we, quite frankly, finance the capital costs of these arrays, is that they are so stable and so predictable. We use sun hour projections based on 40 years of sun hour statistics that are local. And we create models based on those predictions, and we build an array that is warranted for that same time span of 25 years. So all in all, we project our operating costs, and we don't believe there are going to be any surprises. The difference between this and a number of other technologies that I believe you have experience with is that the sun is actually our source for power, and it comes up every day and goes down every night. We have a free and very reliable source of energy in the sun. So this project will give the county predictability in power rates for 25 years. So as a subscriber and as the anchor subscriber to this solar array, at 6.6 cents, we have 25 years of predictability because you know that that power rate is only going to go up by 1.5 cents every year, 1.5%, pardon me, every year, relative to utility projections for cost increases, which sit somewhere in the 2 to 3% range. So we have given an escalator that is very conservative, and one of the benefits of doing that is that you benefit over the span of time in the spread between our escalator and what you would typically see from a utility. So the other thing that I wanted to note was that because 98% of the power from this array is actually going to be subscribed to by local power users, either residents or small businesses, this is an option to buy for the county. The county is not locked into purchasing this power. The 2% of power that the county is looking to purchase here, if the county were to decide that they have a better energy source somewhere else, then we would just be responsible for going out and selling that 2% of the entire production of the array to other private residents or small businesses. So this is an option to purchase at a very competitive rate, 6.6 cents, but it's not an obligation. So I think it's important to note that because it does differentiate this project and its value proposition for some previous models that you've seen. So the solar project development process is fairly long. So I'll just capture where we are today in terms of the process. So we've been working on the portfolio of arrays for about a year and a half now. And we have done estimates, educated estimates with our engineering consultants on interconnection costs. We are working through the legal agreements with about 16 of the 24 participating organizations right now. Typically, those documents would include a power purchase agreement and a lease in order to assure site access. In the case of the county, we've also exchanged terms of a land development agreement. So that's in play. And we're also in the process of reviewing the standard documentation, the PPA and the lease. Next steps include the authorization and signing of the land development agreement, submission to NYSEG for interconnection, permitting. In this case, it will be through the Town of Senate, and that would include the seeker process, engineering review and due diligence, then signature of the PPA should the county decide to purchase their power from the array, and then submission to NYSERDA for the Block 12 incentive to assist in the funding of the capital stack for the array, and then final approval of design and construction. Our hope would be, if you look at the very bottom there, that we would see commercial operation in May of 2019, which would be very exciting after 3 years of work. We want to be good neighbors. We want to be a positive contribution to your community. We want to contribute to New York's goal of 50% renewable power by 2030. We will employ local trades in both the build and the maintenance of the array. We'll give electricity consumers a choice to use green power and save money. And we'll offer local businesses an opportunity, provided they're under the demand cap, to reduce their electricity bills, making doing business in the area more competitive. Do we have any questions?
Mr. Lattimore.
I've been associated with a lot of different projects over the years, and I'm a member of the Power Authority for the county, and we also was a member of the county, of the board with the city. Now, every time that there's been a project in the county, it hasn't gone as well as it should have, because the Power Authority wasn't seated at the board. And I know, Chris, we've worked for years, and we showed you these arrays that you're presenting tonight, and we have no problem with fostering or bringing forth alternative energy. We've been in the business for a while. But without the Power Authority there, especially with the interconnects, you're going to have a lot of difficulty. So I would suggest that whatever Fred or any other attorney that's being used, that they consult with our Power Authority so that the project is successful. The digester and the cogens and the Power Authority was never seated at the board, and because of that, there was difficulty. I think that our input is very important to the success of these projects, because we have a different law than most counties. We can build power stations. We can, transport power over roads. So I wish that we incorporate anything that we do, that we're part of the decision-making in the legalese. Are we going to have a bond in this project when it's done in 25 years, that the removal of the panels?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. That's good. That's just one thing.
Yeah. Thank you. So we did include CAPUSA in our early presentations to the county. We've done a full walkthrough with them previously, just so that folks are aware, and we welcome any discussion that would bring value to the project.
Mr. Dennison.
Yeah, I'm always the pessimist, so will you guarantee savings? Because I've done a little research myself. I spoke to people who've gotten into these communities and stuff, and they're like households and whatnot, and their bills actually are not a lot, but $10, $15, $20 a month more. And if they're okay with that because they want to say they're going green, that's fine. But if they're being told they're going to see a savings and they're not, then are you guaranteeing a savings in writing?
So is this a community solar project? Because
Yeah.
we've only got maybe 4 of them built in the entire state.
Well, people that have been in, what is the one there's another one here in New York State that's been, Arcadia or something, that's been sending things
Yeah,
around.
so Arcadia, they have a somewhat different business model. That they actually can sell power at a premium. I've seen contracts with Arcadia where they're actually committing to green power, but at a premium. That's not what we're talking about here. We are actually talking about a discount, but our discount floats with VEDR. So we are committing to a 10% discount from VEDR, from the value of distributed energy monetary credit that will appear on your power bill. I zipped through and I reduced a couple of pages on this deck, but effectively what VEDR does is it converts the energy that we pump into the grid to monetary credits. So if we generate energy, it goes into the grid, the utility is notified that Mr. Batman is a subscriber to our array, and what he sees on his bill is a monetary or a real dollar credit for the amount of power that he's subscribed to. So if on a monthly basis his bill would have been $100 and he's subscribed to the power, then he would see a monetary credit for $90 on his bill. The remaining $10 he would pay, and then he would see a second bill from us for $80, and the net of his requirement would be $90, so that 10% discount. So what we're doing is generating monetary credits that show up on your utility bill. It's a little different than some of the precursor net metered credits that I think you're alluding to, and Arcadia Power, which in most circumstances aren't committing to a discount.
So basically, you are guaranteeing a savings.
We are guaranteeing a savings off meter. Yes, we are.
Mr. Lattimore.
Just, I mean, the 6% rate or 6 cent rate that you show there is not the all-in cost. I mean, that's a very attractive rate, I think.
Can you clarify?
Is that your all-in rate, Chris?
It's 6.6 cents.
That's all-in, delivered?
So
That
currently,
would be the rate that we purchase at if we entered into the power purchase agreement. That's not the same rate that would be available to the public.
That's
That would be
correct.
the preferred rate available to us as the municipal sponsor.
At the location without transportation.
No, for all of our power needs across all of our bills. So it would be available to, our campus up there is under contract and is provided power from the digester, and that will still be the case. This would, and that's pre-grid, so that's directly supplied. This would apply to all of our bills throughout the county, all of our power bills in all of our locations throughout the county.
We proposed that concept probably 5 years ago, so it's not new.
Mr. Foley.
Just a quick question for you. You said the remaining production would be available to county and county residents, small businesses for a 10% savings, which could generate a 2.6 million savings over 25 years. Is that based on a certain amount of residents that would be part of this? Is there a number for that, or that you use to?
So it's about 1,000. It's just a little over 1,000. It depends on what we use as the average consumption. So we work on a weighted model. But it could be 1,200, it could be 900, depending on how much power your local constituents, or more importantly, the subscribers that put their hand up to subscribe, actually use. So if your average user uses, 1,000 kilowatts a year, or if your average user uses 1,200 to 1,500, I'm not quite sure what the average size home or the relative insulation would be in this particular constituency, but so we go to a lower average.
Mr. Batman.
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. The first one is that the PSA made some changes earlier this year. Were those changes in the VEDR computation? Or were they
There
something
have
else?
been 3 fluctuations in VEDR this year, up, down, up, down. We have another white paper that will increase the rate slightly. So as I say, VEDR as a concept is a locked-in contract, but VEDR fluctuates.
So savings would fluctuate then for individuals?
Yes.
Okay. My other question is that you mentioned the locked-in, and I think you've answered this, that 10%, the variance between the VEDR rate and the billed rate, that's a contractual.
That's the
amount.
contractual
That will not
commitment.
change.
That's for the subscribers. That's different from the county. The county gets the preferred PPA rate. That's what Chris's team negotiated with a whole group of developers, and we were selected to deliver on that rate.
Okay, and in follow-up to that, do you know what the number would be if this were in place today? What would the number, given the current meter, what would be the number per kilowatt that a household would pay or a small business? Do you know that offhand?
I don't know that off the top of my head, but I could get it for you.
That would be great, I think.
Mr. Dennison.
Wait, I have one more if I may, then you won't have to come back to it.
Go ahead.
My final question is that you mentioned the term leasing the land. Is there discussion of a lease cost, or is the model precipitated on no lease cost?
So currently, the cost-saving PPA model is predicated on no lease value. Of the 33 sites in the portfolio currently, we have one site that has moved to lease only because they see no benefit in purchasing the power because they have hydroelectric power of their own. So everyone else is working under the umbrella of a power purchase benefit, either for remote net metered, which is total value to the town or government, or community solar, which there are nuanced differences in the actual agreements, but the premise is the same.
Okay, so because it's an option and not a purchase, if we opt out in the future, would it be renegotiated to have a lease payment or no?
So it's not currently modeled that way. Something to be discussed, though, if your preference were to go with lease only and no power benefit.
Mr. Dennison.
Thank you.
This is kind of similar to like the ESCOs. So when you talk about the 6.6 cents, does NICEAG still have, like, I buy my electricity through an ESCO, but I still get a delivery charge through RG&E. Oops. So is there still delivery charge on top of the figure that you're giving us?
So the monetary credit is a monetary credit that offsets your total bill. This is unlike the previous net metering legislation where you only offset your supply. That's not what this is. This is a monetary credit. So if we generate $90 in credit for Mr. Batman's bill, it goes against whatever dollar value on your bill, and you get a net number at the end of every month.
So there's still going to be delivery charge.
Mr. Lattimore.
Solar's heavily subsidized, ethanol is subsidized, wind is subsidized. I happened to be with the governor when we did the groundbreaking for Solar City in Buffalo. That was subsidized. So, we have to be careful with these projects in regards to where the subsidies are and how long the subsidies are lasting.
Any other questions? All right. Well, thank you.
Great. Thank you very much for your time.
If I may, Mr. Chair, the next steps in this from our perspective are for Fred to touch base with Abundance attorneys, hopefully finalize some of the contractual issues that we've been discussing and some of the questions that have been being exchanged, some of the questions you asked tonight, and we're hoping to bring forward the agreements through the committee cycle this month so that we'll be able to hopefully get the contract signed, or at least the land development agreement signed, so that they can move forward and make their application for interconnect.
As I suggested, is Capusa going to be at the table with the...
Capusa has been at the table. In fact, the vice chairman of Capusa sat on the selection committee for...
I know he did.
Yeah, and
I know he did.
so we're happy to talk to you more about this. Yes.
Continue the conversation.
All right. Do we have anybody for public to be heard?
Yes. I'd like to... Dale Bush is here tonight to discuss one of our positions in the Veterans Office.
Okay. Mr. Bush, when you get up, can you please state your name and address for the record and keep your comments to about 3 minutes?
Dale Bush, 116 Standard Woods, Auburn, New York.
And I am here tonight because you have before you an authorization to fill the full-time Director of Veteran Service Agency position. And I know that the name being put before you is someone who does not work in that office right now. I don't know the person that's being put before you, but I do know the people that work in the office right now. As you can see, I'm a Vietnam veteran. I have worked with all three, Larry before his retirement, Lindsay and Chris at different times. I guess my first dealing with any VA thing was about 45 years ago when I wanted to get a VA mortgage. I have done nothing with the Veterans Office until 2013 when I was diagnosed with a cancer that is on the list for Agent Orange. It is also on a list that probably none of you know about unless you're a Marine, and they have a fancy name for it, but we call it the Camp Lejeune Dirty Water. Camp Lejeune in North Carolina is a very large Marine base, and the water was contaminated from the mid-50s to the mid-80s. A lot of those diseases, being presumptive, are on both lists. So I, as a Marine, have a double whammy against me. I've got some other medical problems, one of which is Thursday morning I have to go in for open heart surgery. I applied for VA benefits back in 2016 when I was aware that my condition would worsen. I was denied those benefits. I have appealed them. I've been on an appeal list for 27 months now, and I'm still looking at about 17 more months before I reach the top of the pile. And as I just stated, I'm going in Thursday morning to have the operation. Those in the office right now have done everything possible, and I believe they are being successful of moving my appeal up the list. I think, though, especially Lindsay, who was, in my estimation, groomed by Larry to take his position when he left. I think she would do a wonderful job, and I know Chris is just a go-getter to get you everything they can. So I ask that you consider possibly not appointing whosever name is put before you tonight, going back and possibly considering Lindsay Wilkinson again for this position. Thank you.
Anybody else for public to be heard? All right, we have minutes to approve, July 24th and July 26th, 2018.
Move them.
Second.
Any discussion on the minutes? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Those are carried. CCC report, Dr. Durant.
Good evening, everyone. First, want to recognize one of our trustees with us today, Marion Brown. Just a few updates since last month. Obviously, we've been focused in the month of August at bringing in our new class. Classes started yesterday on both of our campuses. We did end our recruitment cycle with applications for the college slightly up, and we are on pace, it's day 2, to hit our fall targeted enrollment again this year. As you also know, at the end of this month, at the end of August, it's the end of our fiscal year for the institution. And as I've been reporting monthly of where we're at, we're in a position where we have met our budgeted expectations for this year on the revenue side, and also met and exceeded our enrollment expectations for this particular year, fulfilling what we've talked about for months, which is the first year of growth since, I believe, 2011 for the institution. That's ultimately not a realistic place for us to look ahead. We know our demographics in the state. We know that enrollments in community colleges across many of our institutions across the state are down. But, you know, as we live in an environment similar to what you do, which is year to year, with the most predictable way that we can look at it, we're going to take it and we're going to continue to work towards as we focus on 18-19. When we're looking at the other aspects of the institution, this fall, we're looking to work with our trustees on creating a framework to begin the development of the next college's strategic plan. When I arrived back in 2015, the institution was finalizing sort of its development of a plan that has worked us, I think, through our path of the last 3 years, focusing on getting through our Middle States accreditation and working through some of the emergencies that we had faced. I think it's now time, and I've mentioned this in previous months, for us as an institution to take a better sense of where we're at today and more so document and create a path with our community on where we need to be going as we look ahead. So from an institutional standpoint, with trustee leadership in the rest of the institution, I think it's an important time for us to be looking at 2020 and beyond, which is what we'll be taking on this year. The other things that I've mentioned, we mentioned this in the spring, we were doing a provost search, and as you know, we did not select a candidate at the end of that. We will be beginning in September a new national recruitment for our provost position, which is the #2 position in the organization. Our current provost, Dr. Ann Herron, is looking to retire in the spring semester, and we'll be beginning that search nationally right away. Last month, we talked a little bit about the continued exploration and I would say conversation with the City of Auburn and Falcon Park. We continue to do our due diligence, and we continue to have, I think, great discussions and negotiations with hopes of reaching an agreement, but that still has not come to fruition. Hopefully in the coming weeks, we'll be able to kind of come together and look at that opportunity for our student athletes and certainly for our academic opportunities. The other things that are exciting, I think, going into college, of course, right now, is we are spending a great deal of time reviewing our marketing strategies, reviewing our enrollment strategies, seeing what worked and what is working, and continue to fine-tune that we can set ourselves up for next year. We've done some marketing efforts this past summer, focusing on our Advanced Manufacturing Institute in Auburn, and also focusing on a number of other initiatives that we think will pay the institution well. You may be aware we've done some editorials with the Citizen this past couple weekends. I think on Sundays we ran them. And one of them is we're announcing sort of a community lecture series, have various topics and schedule throughout the year, trying to engage the community to be able to come in and participate and take advantage of a great experience of learning about various topics. The other one is we've partnered with Locate Finger Lakes on sort of an Entrepreneurs Academy that's going to be allowing young people to be able to get a year-long experience in developing their ideas about entrepreneurship and really trying to create another opportunity for our youth and partnering with various community members. So we're in our recruitment stage for that particular program. We have materials that we've submitted out, and we'll continue to recruit. So if you know of people between, I believe it's between 7th grade and 12th grade that are interested in those particular programs, certainly have them take a look on our website about those potential opportunities. With that concludes my report. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Mr. Lattimore.
I'd just like to say that Ms. Brown was very instrumental in Wells College's alternative energy issues. Is that not correct? Keep up the good work. That's it.
Mr. Bennett?
Yes, thank you. Doctor, I was at the board meeting last week or so, or 2 weeks ago, and we've changed the time of the board meetings. Could you elaborate why we did that? Because finally, after all year, 2 months ago, we finally some of us legislators start receiving the invite to the meeting like 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock that day when we got home from work or so. And now we've changed the hours. Can you elaborate on why we did that?
I actually can't speak to, and Legislator Ripley brought this to my attention, I believe, about 3 months ago. I actually can't speak to the process in which you get invited, but certainly we as an institution would be happy to send you invitation and the agendas much earlier. The decision and exploration, and you were there, so you heard, was a discussion of our trustees when it came to what meeting time they wanted to look at based on their own self-reflection. The issues come up about public engagement, the issues come up about transparency, and I can appreciate the sentiments, but I also want to walk through a number of things that we've done in recent months to try to increase engagement and try to increase our transparency to the community. Number one, about 6 months ago, we began adding the minutes for all of our committees on top of usually the oral report that'd be given at the meetings themselves. We started to pipe in interactive video for both campuses, encouraging our employees and others that are convenient to their locations to participate. And as you know, just this month, we piloted to be able to capture it through video, and our goal is to be able to put it on our website, closed captioning for individuals who need the assistance, and also to be able to put it on public access. So although the time itself may be different, we haven't had a great deal of public participation in the time that we've been offering. And I believe the sentiments of the trustees that night was to be able to try this for a year, perhaps increase engagement, and hopefully the other steps we're taking will be able to increase both awareness of the institution, the great things that are going on at the institution, and hopefully the engagement of the community itself.
But it was my understanding that the live streaming or the streaming of these minutes will be after the fact. Is that correct?
Well, we're required in some cases, if we're going to put things on our website, that it needs to be ADA compliant. And we're testing it right now, and the quickest turnaround we can get to be able to get it on our website, to be able to be compliant with closed captioning, right now we anticipate is 4 business days. And so that is part of the reason for the delay. We're hoping to get it out in public access television quicker than that, and we'll be looking to try to expedite that as quickly as we can. We're also, from a cost perspective, we chose to use a technology on our campus that we already had purchased, and then therefore we wouldn't be increasing the overhead cost to be able to do it.
Thank you.
Mr. Lattimore.
We have a committee system, and I know that you used to report to the Government Ops Committee, and you don't do that anymore in regards to what Mr. Bennett is indicating, that transparency is what we want to have. And there's some big spends that you want to do, and I think that this government should be involved in those as a partner with the college. So
I agree. I think you are a partner. You obviously are our sponsor, our support. I'm not aware of what you may be referring to that I'm not being completely transparent about. There are things that take the appropriate timing and things that need to be addressed at the right moment. But ultimately, we continue to due diligence. We've talked about the modernization plan for the campus. It's not ready yet to be fully discussed and rolled out because it's just not completed. And so, as I've said before, we encourage patience. We're trying to represent you as best we can, and I think ultimately we are working hand in hand on supporting our community and be able to be the best educational resource we can for our students.
Mr. Foley.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I think it's important to note here that the president acts as kind of the executive of the college. The Board of Trustees made the decision to move their times, and we're in a situation where it seems we shouldn't shoot the messenger, so to speak. And any issues maybe should be discussed with the trustees, and there's a certain time and place for that. I mean, it's okay to certainly ask questions, but we have the person here that's trying to interpret the actions of another board, and it raises difficulties through that process. I just want to make sure that's well established here.
And Mr. Foley, I can appreciate those comments as a trustee, and I can assure you that there is some discussion going on about that meeting time. So where it ends up, we don't know at this point. Any other questions for Dr. Durant?
Appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, committee reports and individual legislator reports. Anybody have anything they would like to share? Mr. Vitale.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to have an opportunity to give the legislator a short update on our health consortium, and if you would allow Mr. Orman to give a 1.5-minute presentation on what we've been doing the last few months and some of the good results that we're seeing. If that's up to you, Mr. Chairman.
Absolutely. Mr. Orman, come on down.
1.5 minutes.
No, years ago, it started right in that room in there, in caucus room 1, with a group of some department heads got together and thought.
Mr. Orman, can we get you to come up to the mic just so the recording can pick you up? Thank you.
Now you only got a minute.
As I said, it started 10 or 11 years ago, right over in that room with some interested department heads, and it gradually grew into a consortium that now includes Soil and Water, Cayuga Community College, Cayuga County, and the City of Auburn, which was a big addition last year. That put us over 1,700 and some odd members of this consortium. And we're often not compared. In those circles, they often talk about Tompkins County Health Consortium as the model. And they are a standalone consortium. What's failed to be noted in our community is our rates are 24 to 30-some% lower than Tompkins, because we've been asked, why don't you join Tompkins instead of you trying to get other municipalities and entities to join you? And right now, we don't have to. In fact, they should be joining us. They're not interested in that because they're standalone. But our consultants are going out to other municipalities to seek new members. But it would have to be the right fit. It's not just for numbers. It's who would fit into our consortium as far as potential members. Each one of our 4 entities that are part of this have 2 members. We're fortunate to have Ben Vitale and Lynn Marinelli as the county representatives. And I can assure you from attending those meetings, they do their due diligence. So you're well represented there. But that particular consortium that we have formed and grown is healthy, strong, and in very good hands. Thank you.
Mr. Lattimore.
Mr. Chairman, the Health Consortium hopefully will grow to the number that is needed in order for us to have more options within it. At the time, the hospital we would love to have as part of our membership. The school districts we would love to have. And I know that Justin's reached out to the north, and it's too bad that we were a little late in asking Seneca Falls. I think that they're halfway down the road with the Tompkins Consortium, which is higher. As Jim indicated, our rates are lower, and between the individual stop loss and the aggregate stop losses, it's very well protected, and the assets have grown.
Any other legislative reports? All right. If not, we will move on to the county administrator's report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Legislators, we held 4 public hearings this month on the shared services plan. The one up in the north and down in the south were fairly well attended. And we submitted the final draft of the plan after those hearings to the shared service panel, who who adopted the plan. The next steps in that process are for us to finalize the plan, submit it to the state within the next couple of weeks, and then have one final public presentation on it. The legislature did authorize the resolution for the website with Civic Plus, so we've held project kickoffs on that. The consultants will be here in September to work with our department heads on preparing for their content migration. I also sent a letter or a memo to the 24 municipalities in your districts whose websites we host, letting them know about the process, and I wanted to make sure you guys were aware of that as well, so in case anybody had any questions. But basically, anybody that wants to stay on our hosting will migrate their website over to ours for free, continue to host that at no cost, and that's part of our contract. But we've also negotiated with Civic Plus, and if they want to customize their site or do something more sophisticated, then they'll have a pricing menu to do that that's below what their market would be if they were trying to do that on their own. We held several interviews last month for the 2 key positions you authorized our filling. One was the deputy treasurer position, and I was very grateful to Jim for letting me participate in that. Mike Russell did a great job running both of these interviews. Jim actually participated in both, one as the appointing authority, the other as a veteran. Mr. Ripley also participated in our interviews as a veteran. Ray helped with the veteran services one as well for the integration of services. And Jim hopes to have an announcement for you soon on the deputy treasurer position. You heard the comments tonight. We interviewed, and we were fortunate to have a really incredible pool of candidates that we interviewed, including our own. The committee was very happy with the recommendation that they made. and I hope that you'll act on that nomination tonight. I think you had an opportunity. Many of you had an opportunity to meet with the candidate we recommended, and we're eager to get her on board and move that forward. Broadband update. Mr. Ripley and I attended the hearing on the Verizon broadband permit application down in Venice. I think I sent you a brief update of that. The more important broadband update is that we did issue the right-of-way permit last month. Construction has begun. Regular construction meetings have been taking place between our highway staff and New Vision's, and so far everything is moving along at their pace, at New Vision's pace, and we haven't had any problems to date, so we're happy with the performance. I believe they're happy, and I haven't heard anything otherwise. So hopefully that makes you all happy as well. Planning and Public Health made the presentation of the watershed, the draft watershed management plan. There's a resolution related to water and continuing the next steps in our water quality development rules and regulations and facilitation tonight. The sheriff facilitated a meeting with the Cayuga Nation that several legislators attended, as well as myself, Mr. Batman, Mr. Vitale, some of the local town supervisors and mayors in districts who are affected. I think there's a number of issues that we need to continue to discuss about how to move forward with that, and we'll look to the political leadership for that, but Fred and myself and the professional staff are, we've been taking notes, and there's a number of things we'll need to update you on and get your input and feedback on. We're continuing to work with the state on trying to address mitigation in advance of the winter, so we don't have the same type of flooding issues we had related to the Old Erie Canal next winter. We have got a little bit of traction and some communication going forward. Planning and the Canal Corp are in touch with each other now after some connections that we made through the governor's office, so that's been helpful to move that forward. Raise the age planning is well underway. We're close to finalizing the plan. We had several more meetings in the past month, a very constructive meeting today, and we should have a draft plan for you very shortly. And a couple of fun things to report as well. Over 100 employees, over 100 tickets were picked up for what was going to be our employee appreciation night at the Auburn Double Days. Unfortunately, that got rained out, even though it didn't rain. And it was too bad. We did reschedule, and we had about 25 people show up at the reschedule. It was a little smaller than we had hoped, but it was everybody that showed up had a great time. And next year, we'll get that on the calendar earlier, so hopefully more of the elected officials can come and a larger number of employees can come. But everybody that came had a great time. And because it was a small event, I did pay for open bar. And last Friday, we had a Munch and Mingle fundraiser here at the county office building for Perform for Purpose, and they played out in the front lawn, and I want to thank Perform for Purpose for that and for the work they do in the community and teaching our kids music and also providing a lot of fun for all the events that they play at. So happy to take any questions anybody has.
Mr. Lattimore.
In regards to energy and energy cost, I've asked Justin to, and we've had some meetings with Seneca County, our neighbors. I'd like to be able to have a joint bid or see whether or not their gas and electric rates are less than ours. And I've asked them to sign some documents so that they can get our meters and get some numbers, which I think has already been done earlier. But anyways, I'd like to see Seneca County participate, not just Mega, not just Capusa, but we should have, in our shared services, we shouldn't be locked into one vendor. So I want to make sure that we have diversity with some of our choices.
Other questions for the administrator? Mr. Foley.
Yeah, Justin, just a quick update. I think the back parking lot seems to be going well. That there was some hesitancy to start that project in part because of the effect it could have on our employees. Do you have any updates on that? Is our employees fine with going into the front door and just stuff like that?
Sure. The main storm drain is now disconnected from the sewer drain and is connected into a standalone storm drain. There's still some work to do with a drain that's in the stairwell. There is more work to do in the parking lot to capture runoff from the rest of the parking lot, as well as where it's going to go out towards the city's new parking lot. So there's still some work to be done out there. The city has provided free parking for county employees, and it is not as convenient as parking out back, but I've asked everybody who's able to park over there so that spaces are available here for people who aren't as able. We've temporarily assigned accessible parking over in the historian and records management office, so we still have an adequate number of accessible parking. And the project is well underway. We expect it to last for a couple more weeks, and I can give you a more detailed update in a written report. But so far, everything is progressing well. The city has done a great job both in designing and project managing, and keeping buildings and grounds and myself up to date in every step of the process. So it's another great example of a shared service where, for those who aren't aware, that the city did the engineering and is doing the project management at a fixed fee, which was far below market rate, and it was mutually beneficial to both of us.
And free parking is over in the parking garage?
As well as providing free parking in the garage, correct.
Thank you.
Mr. Lattimore.
I believe Justin and I and Sue had an employee recognition thing. Did we have that on the list or no?
That wasn't on my list. I've done several employee recognition events this month. We put those out in the chatter in the employee newsletter and promote them internally, but we haven't done any external promotion about those.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, I have a brief chairman's report. First and foremost, I want to thank Justin, his office, Monica, Steve Lynch, his office, Lynn Marinelli, for all their work on, and everybody else that participated and worked on the shared services. All the municipalities and towns and villages that came out to those Friday meetings and gave up 2 hours every afternoon. I thought the process was great. It was organized, it was structured, it was informative. Although there may not have been agreement on every piece of the plan, I think everybody walked away from there saying, we are doing some of this stuff already, and 2 entities may be doing it, and other entities realized that they could jump on board with this. So I think the process was very worthwhile. It was great to see that it was passed. I believe it was 23-2?
I believe that's correct.
23-2. So again, it'll move forward to our public hearing, and then we can submit that plan as well. I'm also talking about the broadband. I'm glad it's going well. I did talk to Mr. Ripley, and it seems like everything's going well down in the southern part of the county. It was a long process, and it's worthwhile to note that the process worked eventually. Everybody came to the table, and the discussions were had, concerns were alleviated, and the project is underway, so that's good news. A few of us went down to Washington for about, seems like 24 hours. Great trip. I'm not going to go through everything that we learned and everybody we talked to. I got to thank our tour guide, Mr. Lattimore, who pointed out yet another connection to Auburn, but throughout the trip pointed out every connection to Auburn and Washington, D.C. So that was very educational for us. A couple of highlights. What we did is we toured the White House, and then we went to the Eisenhower building, where we had a bunch of secretaries, assistant secretaries, and directors come and talk about their departments, where they wanted to go, and how they can be assistants to New York and New Jersey, upstate New York and New Jersey. New York City was not invited to this particular event. So just a couple of highlights. Kellyanne Conway was the first one to speak, and she spoke a lot about the opioid crisis and how active and supportive she is in that. She did mention a National Take Back Day on October 27th. I know we've had state and local Take Back Days, but they're pushing a national one. Also very supportive of any creative ideas and plans that we can generate and send her way. If the federal government can support it in any way, she's more than happy to look at those things, because that's one of her key things that she's looking at. So October 27th will be the National Take Back Day. They're looking to have another one in the spring, again, raising that awareness, turning in prescription drugs, and getting that out of the flow of the community. Director of Energy spoke quite a bit about solar and wind energy, and and how that's the wave of the future. Knowing that 20 to 30 years from now, we're still going to be relying on fossil fuels, but how do we clean it up a little bit at a time going forward, which kind of fits in with Abundant in their presentation tonight. another thing for the community colleges and adult ed. They were talking about employment and how they are really focusing on community colleges and adult ed programs to retrain the unemployed or underemployed, and they're very committed to that. And again, if we have ideas, we have contact names now, and I'm sure you do, that we can put those out to. Agriculture was another big thing. Mr. Dennison was all over that. The one thing I did find out that I was very surprised about is New York State is the third largest exporter in the country, and that's mostly due to agriculture. So when we sit here and say that agriculture is important, it truly is important.
That's why I was all over it.
Yeah. And then after that, we did get to spend a little time with our colleagues from Onondaga County. We toured the Capitol, had some conversations with them. It was good, nice to get to know them and have those conversations about, things that we can do together or things we can push forward together. I also spent a little bit of time with Steve Aquario about redistricting the charter structure, and we're going to continue that conversation. We're going to have some meetings set up in Rochester, and I'll bring that information back to the leadership team because as this body has charged them with looking into it, I'll bring back initial information and then eventually probably bring him to those meetings to pick his brain on how other counties have done this and what it looks like and what's the best way to do it and the most non-political way to do it. I think that is all I have. So unless anybody has any questions. Mr. Lattimore.
Just, Onondaga County is very important to us because, major employers with Tessie, with Hill-Rom, Welch Allen, and hopefully we can develop more relationships with our Onondaga colleagues.
Absolutely. I think it was a great step in that direction. Any other questions? All right. So we are on to
Appointments and reappointments.
Move them.
Second.
I have a second. Any discussion on the appointments? Mr. Bennett?
I'd like them separated, please.
Okay.
I'd like the Cayuga County Board separated, please.
So Office of the Agent and WQMA, you want to keep
One
together?
term, yes.
Okay. So let's vote on those two first. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, now for the Cayuga Community College Board of Trustees, Anthony Francicelli. Mr. Bennett?
Has he, has he been interviewed and okayed with the time change and everything, or are we going to be changing times for him now, for the board meetings? Any idea?
No, he is not. We have not inquired to his availability as time change. But thank you for your inquiry.
I mean, we're making the changes for one person on the other board, might be changing it again.
Any other discussion on that appointment? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That is carried. Communications and announcements.
Waive it, please.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor of waiving? Opposed? That is carried. All right, we will get right into Ways and Means. Mr. Bennett?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Regular monthly resolutions, 1A and 1B, I'd like to move them as a bundle. They've been through committees and passed.
Move it.
Second.
Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Those are carried.
Ways and Means, Mr. Chairman, had 3 resolutions. Ways and Means 1 had no motion at Ways. Ways and Means 3 was tabled at Ways, so I'd like to just offer up Ways and Means 2 that went to the committee.
Second?
Second.
Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? WM2 is carried.
Mr. Chair, I noticed normally on the agenda, there's an opportunity to bring motions from the floor, so I just would point out that I would like to do that when the time comes up. It's relating to Ways and Means 1.
So if you want to bring that forward right now?
Oh, is that okay with you?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Yeah, I think that my understanding is the reason Ways and Means 1 was tabled is there were some questions on the language, and that language has been...
Excuse me, Mr. Bennett, can we just get a second on your motion
Oh,
so we can have that
second.
discussion?
Thank
All
you.
right, second. All right,
Thank you.
now we can
Sorry.
have discussion.
So that language has been cleaned up in accordance with the concerns, so that I don't think there's any reason not to move on it.
Mr. Dennison?
Can we see it then? I mean,
I have copies. You guys want resolution?
well, I'm just saying if it was... wasn't moved for that purpose, we ought to be able to see that it has been cleaned up, that's all. Not that I'm calling you a liar or anything. But I like to see things. I like to see things black and white.
Which I gave to you. I have the paper one.
That gray chart, they're gonna work on that gray chart. Oh, large, you're gonna make it big.
Well, thank you. Let me review that. So as everybody's reviewing that, Mr. Westfall, did this go through your
It did.
review?
I made the edits before the meeting started. If you'll look at whereas number 2, the old resolution, which you should have in the, wherever things are uploaded to, whereas 2 and 3 were combined, so we struck some language from that. That's the recommendation. Thank you. And it resulted in what you see now as the new whereas section. Any questions?
All right. Any questions, concerns on WN1? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? WM1 is carried. Mr. Bennett, anything else?
No, sir, Mr. Chairman, thank you.
All right, Health and Human Service, Ms. Daly.
Yes, Health and Human Services had 6 resolutions this month. They've gone through Health and Human Service Committee and Ways and Means. Unless anyone has any reason to separate them, I would offer them up as a bundle, HH1 through HH6.
Second.
Any discussion on HH1 through HH6? Not, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Those are carried. Anything else for us, Ms. Daly? Government Ops, Ms. Foley.
Government Operations had 8 resolutions, 2 received no motions, so I offered 3, GO3 through 8 as a bundle, unless anyone would like one singled out.
Move them.
Second.
All right, we have, Mr. Dennison, would you like one separate?
Yeah, I'd like number 8 separate, please.
All right. So we have a motion for GO3 through 7 as a bundle.
Move it.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Those are carried. GO8.
Mr. Chairman, GO8 authorizes to fill a full-time Director of Veteran Services Agency position in the County Veterans Office. I offered that up as well. It did pass Government Operations and Ways and Means.
Any discussion on GO8? Mr. Lattimore.
Mr. Chairman, after hearing Mr. Bush speak tonight in regards to utilizing the office and seeing our personnel and encouraging the person who's been there learning, I'll be voting for our present employee.
The resolution is to appoint that person, not select that person. So it's not a vote for any particular person. It's to fill it with the person's name that's there. You can vote against it, but you're not voting for the other person.
Right. I'm voting for the position, but not the person.
Okay. Any other discussion on GO8? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Opposed.
Mr. Dennison? Mr. Lattimore, you're opposed?
Yeah.
Okay. So GO8 passes. Mr. Foley, anything else?
That will be it, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Planning, Mr. Pinckney.
Mr. Chairman, planning has 3 resolutions, have been through both committees. Seeker approval, I would like to offer as a bundle.
So we have PL 1 through 3 as a bundle.
Move them.
Second.
Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Thank you.
Public Works, Mr. Whitman.
Mr.
Chairman, Public Works has 6 resolutions for your consideration tonight. I would like to bundle them, unless anyone would like one singled out. They would be PW 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, and 7.
So the motion to bundle.
Move it.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Those are carried. Anything else, Mr. Whitman?
No, PW 4, I believe, will be coming up shortly. It was in regard to the solar project that the presentation was on tonight.
That's coming through committee again next month.
We'll finalize the agreements as requested and bring them back through committee.
With Kafusa present?
Judicial and Public Safety.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Benson.
Judicial and Public Safety had 6 resolutions. They all, oh no, excuse me, we had 9 resolutions. They all went through committee and passed. So I'd offer them as a bundle unless somebody wants one separated.
Mr. Chair, could we separate JP 3?
All right, so we have a motion.
And JP 9 also. That calls for 2/3.
Oh, that's right, 9 is a 2/3 vote.
Okay.
Forgot that.
So we have a motion for JP 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 as a bundle. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Those are carried. JP 3.
JP3, authorizing the administrator to sign a contract with Diego's Uppercuts Barber Shop to provide Cayuga County inmates incarcerated at the Cayuga County Jail the services of haircuts and/or trimming of facial hair.
Second.
Second.
Any discussion? Mr. Batman?
Yeah, I would like to offer an amendment. I don't, as I read it, unless I misread, there's no end date. And so I would offer the amendment that the contract be for 1 year and then reviewed and renewed at the conclusion of that year. So there's an end date.
So we have an amendment and a second. Any discussion on that amendment or review after 1 year? All in favor of the amendment?
Aye.
Opposed? That is carried. And now JP3 as amended. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? It's carried.
All right, JP9 requires 2/3 vote. It's authorization to create and fill 1 probation officer in the Cayuga County Probation Department and amending the budget.
Second.
Any discussion on JP9? Mr. Batman?
Yeah, I just want to point out that this position is being created in response to, as I understand it, raise the age, and there's an expectation that it will be funded by the Raise the Age program. If it's not, of course, we're committing to the position, but the expectation is this will be part of the plan and that it's a necessary position, and therefore it will be part of the New York State reimbursement to the county for that cost.
Any other discussion?
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Dennison?
But this also will alleviate some of the burden on the present probation officers who are overburdened by their number of, because they're working on these cases now. So even if it's not reimbursed, which we hope it will be, we were looking at needing another probation officer.
I agree. At least one.
Yeah, at least one.
Because the caseloads are very high there. So if the state reimburses us, that's great, but either way, it's a necessary position.
So our understanding of the Raise the Age guidance is that it's, Raise the Age will pay for the incremental costs associated with implementing Raise the Age, which is likely to ramp up, so it may not be fully at the beginning. But what our intent is, as part of our juvenile justice refocus, is that this position, Raise the Age, is focused on 16 and 17-year-olds. This position will be a juvenile justice probation officer that will be handling juvenile cases, and in that way, will free up the other probation officers for the broader caseload. So we will maximize the extent possible to seek reimbursement from the state. Well, this position will be completely focused on juvenile justice, both Raise the Age and the other cases juvenile cases that are already being handled.
Further discussion on JP9? So we can do a total vote, and if it's close, then we'll do a roll call vote, but if not, we'll just go forward. So all in favor, JP9?
Aye.
Opposed? I guess that's 2/3.
Well, I'd say that's 100%.
Mr. Dennison, anything else for us?
Say me?
Yeah.
No, not tonight, sir.
All right, thank you. We have no executive session, so I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move it.
All in favor? Oh, Mr. Vitale.
I want Caboose to be involved in the adjournment.
All in favor? Aye. We are adjourned.